feels like crying today because I always feel like crying every day. If you're like me, you love sad books, you love sad things, you love depressing, bleak, hopeless books. So today I'm here to share with you some books that made me sob like a baby. It does not happen often. Books do not make me cry often, but when they do, they're typically like my favorite books of all time, and they're typically the books that stick with me. So most of these books are my favorite books of all time. So most of these books here are literary fiction. I do have a couple that are some different genres, but let's just go ahead and get started. I first want to talk about Sarah Rose Etter. I absolutely love her book. She has two books. The first one is Ripe. We are following a woman who moves from Pennsylvania to LA to start a new job and realizes like the grass isn't always greener on the other side. She describes her depression and loneliness and emptiness as like a black hole that is following her. And the way that this book was written, just showing her mental health, her depression, her everyday sadness and hopelessness, and just the shitty side of humanity, the things that are going on around her. This book was so heartbreaking and devastating and just absolutely beautifully written, but gutted me. Gutted me in a way where like I couldn't believe how painfully relatable this was to me. Speaking of gutting me and painfully relatable, her other book, The Book of X, is following a girl who we follow her through like childhood, teenage years to adulthood, and she was born with a knot in her stomach. So her abdomen is in a knot, and she's been going to all these doctors and they don't know how to help her, and she has this deformity, and it's kind of her just dealing with day-to-day life and how she's treated by romantic partners and how she's treated in school, and just like how she's treated by others dealing with this deformity and this medical issue, and the way that doctors gaslight her. And it's so sad, it's so heartbreaking, so deeply relatable to me dealing with endometriosis. I found so much meaning in this book. I don't even know how to describe this writing. It's almost like experimental, but it's just very short, quick little essay. I don't know, it's just very different, but I absolutely loved the depth and just the emotions going through this one. She also like lives on her parents' meat quarry, so they have walls of meat that they have to dig through. It's a weird one, but it's very, very sad. Then I have The Art of Racing in the Rain by Garth Stein. It's about a dog. Need I say more? Like, dogs are my favorite thing on the planet. Dogs bring me so much joy and happiness. I love my dog, and this is from the POV of a dog. So it's a dog kind of describing his owner's life. So this family's life and drama and things going on in the family. And it's told through the perspective of the dog and how the dog views things. And it's so sad. The ending, listen, dogs are so precious, and hearing how this dog views his owner and family, and you can probably guess what happens in the end, but listen, I actually cannot talk about this without almost crying. My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. This is a book about a girl who was groomed and sexually assaulted by her teacher. So she was a teenager, and her teacher was, how old was the teacher again? 42, and she was 15, and she's entered this sexual relationship with her teacher, and it's about her looking back on the past and trying to navigate the feelings and emotions that come along with the realization that she was sexually abused. It's very heavy, it's very disturbing, it's very dark, and very sad, and really sheds light on like the Me Too movement and just very dark, depressing subject matter. The Collective Regrets of Clover by Mickey Brommer. This is a book about a woman who is a death doula. So she's living alone, she's very lonely and isolated. Her only friend is like her elderly neighbor, and she has this job where she is a death doula, so she accompanies her patients as they're dying, so that way they don't die alone. And so we follow her like perspective on death and dying, and also just her perspective on everyday normal life. She struggles with friendships, she struggles with relationships, she's socially awkward, very similar to me, honestly. This is me in this book. And it's just a very beautiful story that really puts a lot into perspective involving death and dying, and like coming to terms with death, and how we're all going to die one day. And it's a very morbid topic, but I feel like it's a very important one. It was handled really well. There's like a little bit of a love story that goes on. It's just a very sad but also very heartwarming and positive book at the same time. Like, it sounds very morbid, but it's spun in this positive light, and I really appreciated that. So many beautiful, beautiful quotes in this book. I'm obsessed with it. It made me sob multiple times. The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. This is a little chunker, but this is historical fiction. We're following these two sisters during World War II, and they both experienced like very different experiences. And the one was split up from her family, and she's trying to like fight and you know, just like fight for what she believes in. And then on the other hand, her sister is at home like with her family and just trying to stay put and kind of be complacent and listen and do what she's told in order to protect her family. Two very different stories, you know, and they intertwine and everything. And what happens, I was hysterically sobbing like a maniac reading this book. What happens in the end, like, so beautiful, so heartbreaking, so well written. I was completely invested in this book, and I didn't even want to read it either. My friend, like, at work at the time was like, we should read this book, and I was like, okay, I mean, I don't really know if it's gonna be my thing, but I'll give it a go. And I was obsessed with it. So yeah, this book broke me. Pretty Girls by Karen Slaughter. This is a thriller, so we are following these two sisters, and when they were teenagers, I think, yeah, it's like 20 years later, so when they were teens, their younger sister disappeared. They never saw her again. They don't know what happened to her. And now in present day, these sisters haven't spoke for a very long time, and the one sister's husband is murdered. And this leads them into, you know, getting back into each other's lives, and we find out that his death is connected to their missing sister. The story kind of goes from there. This is real life horror, like real life shit happening in this book. It's dark, it's disturbing. Yes, I can see how some people say that the twists are predictable, whatever. I devoured this book. I absolutely loved it. I loved where it ended up going, and the end broke me. That's all I gotta say. The end, I was sobbing by the time I finished this book. I was literally in fetal position in my bed, like, just crying because of something very touching at the end. Highly recommend this. One of my favorite thrillers of all time, personally. Listen, it's not a video about crying without mentioning this book, A Little Life by Hani Yanagihara. In this book, we are following a boy named Jude, and we are just following his life on a day-to-day basis with his friends and a lot of trauma and abuse that he suffers. Jude is kind of like the glue of their friendship, and we are just so wrapped up in all of the horrific, terrible things that have happened to him. And this book is so dark and sad and traumatizing. Like, it took me forever to read because it's so sad, and again, like real life horror, real life horrifying subject matter, and I love the exploration of that in books, but it's also just very heavy, and I can see why people wouldn't read this book. They say that it's like trauma porn or whatever, but To me, it was just very deeply touching, and I don't know, I love reading just sad, heavy things like this. Because again, it's real life horror. This stuff actually happens to people. It's sad, but I like being confronted with that truth in a weird way, I guess, that helps me deal with my own trauma and things going on, like being aware of others. I don't know if anything I'm saying makes any sense, but this book has a special place in my heart, will always have a special place in my heart, and I adore this book. I Wished by Dennis Cooper. This is like a transgressive, experimental novel. It's part fiction, part non-fiction. We are following Dennis Cooper, who he believes his only love was a man named George Miles when they were teenagers, and like in present day, like 10 years go by where he's like barely been thinking about George, and then he finds out that George died by suicide, and no one told him for 10 years, and he just finds this out. So he wrote this book, and you know, some essays are nonfiction, just talking about his relationship with George. Some of them are fiction, where he puts George in the stories, and it's him trying to navigate his feelings for George and why he never felt like George was able to fully love him in return. So it's him trying to like process his grief, but also like figure out why the love was not reciprocated. And it's a lot of like longing and yearning. Very, very beautiful book, but like I said, some things are very out there, disturbing, violent, and experimental, like just weird things. There's a story about Santa Claus, there's a story about John Wayne Gacy, like just weird out there stories, but the last two absolutely broke my heart, and I sat here, I wasn't sobbing reading this, but I had like a tear come down, and it broke me, and I for the rest of the night was just so depressed after reading this book. Tuesdays with Morrie by Mitch Albom. This was my favorite book in high school. I was obsessed with this. I read it a few times. So we're following this man named Morrie. He was a professor, and our main character was one of his students, and now he's a journalist, I believe. So he asks Morrie if he can come over and interview him. So every Tuesday they have this agreement where our main character goes and stays with Morrie, who has ALS. So he knows that he's going to die. He knows that he's at the end of his life. And so it's him basically sharing his life lessons before he dies. That's this book. And again, processing like grief and death and dying, and puts these things into a positive light. But it's so sad and depressing. Oh my God. And it is based off of a true story. I read this so many times. I used to work full-time in occupational therapy, and yeah, just reading this book while like going to school to work in occupational therapy was very eye-opening as to like what people are struggling with and what people are dealing with, but also looking at things in a more positive light rather than a morbid one. I love this book so much. Such a special book to me, honestly. Hear Me Out. This next one is kind of out of pocket for me if you've been here, but it's Intermezzo by Sally Rooney. I'm not a Sally Rooney girl, but this one was okay for me because we are following these two brothers after the death of their father. We're just following these two brothers kind of navigate like relationships. So not only grief, but also their relationships with women. One brother is kind of stuck between two different women, and then the other brother is like this nerdy guy who's like never gotten a woman before, and he enters a new relationship. And so very different life experiences, and the way that they are processing their grief is totally different. But the thing that broke me with this book is that the one female character has a chronic pain condition. I think she was in an accident, they said, but it literally could be anything. And just some of the things that she struggles with in regards to chronic pain, I think was handled really well in this book. I don't think, she has not handled endometriosis properly in the past, but in this book here, the way that she describes chronic pain and the things that this character is dealing with, like she was lying on the floor, like throwing up from pain, and then just doesn't want people to be around because she doesn't want people to see her that way. And some of the heartbreaking things like involving intimacy, this book was so deeply touching to me personally, struggling with endometriosis. Like I'm literally about to cry even thinking about it. Yeah, this book really did it for me in terms of chronic pain and what it's like navigating relationships with chronic pain. So yeah, this one, I must admit, has a special place in my heart. People are like, why do you have a Sally Rooney book on your shelves? I'm not gonna lie, it's special to me. It really is. Adelaide by Genevieve Wheeler. This is a book about a girl. She's in her early 20s. She is about to unalive herself and goes to a psychiatric facility, and we discover like what led her to being this depressed. And yeah, we follow her relationship with this man. You know, they fall in love and things kind of go downhill from there once he finds out about the death of his ex-girlfriend. And yeah, it's just following this shitty relationship, navigating a relationship that's more one-sided, gaslighting, kind of like emotional abuse, and also grief as well. So lots of emotions, conflicting feelings, and I was in a relationship that was sort of similar to this one, so this one impacted me a little more than it might others. This book is a little cringe sometimes, I must admit, but yeah, I think the way that this relationship was explored, so spot on to so many relationships. Boy Parts by Eliza Clark. This one, we are following this woman who takes erotic photos of unconventionally attractive men, and she gets a call to display her photos in an art gallery. So this book is literally just following this woman going through her pictures and then telling us about these men. It's like all vibes, no plot, but some of the men that she gets involved with, she's very, very manipulative. She's hilarious, but also unhinged. Okay, so this book is like funny, but also sad, like some of the relationships that she's involved with, some of the men that she's sort of using. Towards the end, there's like a letter from the one guy that made me cry. This book, my emotions were all over the place reading this book. One of my favorite books of all time. I go from laughing to crying to being nihilistic. I don't even know. Such a wild mix of emotions, but the letter made me sob. Then last but not least, I have a non-fiction recommendation, and that's Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner. This is a memoir about this Korean American woman navigating her life after her mom's cancer diagnosis. It's a lot about like her memories. Hello. It's a lot about like her memories with her mom, like how their love language was like sharing food together and, sharing these Korean dishes. So it's a lot of like food talk, but also a lot of cancer talk. And my mom passed away from cancer, so I do feel a special connection to this book, but it was very hard for me to get through, being that I literally experienced something similar. And yeah, and it was very deeply sad and heartbreaking, but also beautiful at the same time. So I recommend if you can handle this. But yeah, those were all the books that made me sob like a baby. If you've read any of these and you liked them, leave a comment down below, or if you have any new recommendations that made you sob, also let me know in the comments down below so I can check them out. I love you guys, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.